Hey, welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR, and we are here to talk about all the things going on in the Big Ten. We've got a Week 12 preview to get to. We've got some coaching carousel stuff to get to, and we've got new news on the Jim Harbaugh, Michigan, Connor Stalions, all that stuff, the juicy information that I apparently just have to put into an episode and everybody watches it. I kid you not, guys. I put Connor Stalions into an episode, it does like 3 times more views than my other episodes. So the basketball episodes are really struggling right now because they have nothing to do about Harbaugh. Which, that is what it is. But I'm going to let my guests introduce themselves before we get going, and then we'll get into all the juicy stuff. We have Max from the Sky U pod here. He covers Minnesota with a couple other guys over there. Max, go and introduce yourself and tell people where they can find the podcast.
Yeah, so we do Go for Football at Sky U Pod. You can find us on Twitter at Sky U Pod 1. Our podcasts are available on pretty much every platform you can listen to, Apple, Spotify. It's all at Sky U Pod. And then we are on YouTube now this year at Sky U Pod. So give us a like and a subscribe, and hopefully we look okay on camera.
There we go. Hopefully. All right, I got my friend Anthony back with us again for his second appearance on the Big Ten Huddle. Anthony is with Spartan Shadows. Go ahead and tell people about yourself, Anthony, where they can find you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me back. I guess I didn't scare you guys off or whatever. So I do some writing on the side for Spartan Shadows. You can find us at spartanshadows.com or on Twitter, Spartan_shadows. My personal Twitter is at the real Shardy. If you're a fan of self-deprecating humor and spreading misinformation and just overall tomfoolery, you can find me there.
All the things that Twitter is known for. So.
Oh yeah, we've been busy. We've been busy this past month.
Oh yeah. We'll get more to that on when we get to the Harbaugh Connor Stalions situation. Don't you worry. So, just to make sure you know, we are a podcast that's brought to you by Big Banter Sports, BigBanterSports.com. Go there for all your Big Ten media needs. And if you're watching on YouTube, please do like and subscribe. We appreciate that. If you're listening on podcast, please do give us a follow or subscribe over there and give us a rating. Let us know how you think we're doing. Let us know what you like, what you don't like. We always like to improve, so we like to hear from you on those things. All right, guys, let's get into this. So, our very first thing we're going to get into is the coaching carousel. We have 4 different Big Ten teams, I guess 3 Big Ten teams right now, and 1 that's coming next year that have some coaching news going into them. Michigan State obviously has been looking for their coach for a while. There's been tons of rumors, nothing really kind of concrete out there. Some news came out today about possible Tony Elliott. I know Michigan State fans weren't too happy about that. The rumor before was Urban Meyer. So when you go from Urban Meyer to Tony Elliott, it's like not really the best transition. And then we have Northwestern, who they just hired David Braun. The UCLA rumor is that Chip Kelley is going to be fired after the USC game. And then, of course, Michigan. What's going on with Michigan? Is Michigan going to have Harbaugh at the end of the year? Are they going to move on from them? Is the NCAA going to force them to move on from them? We'll kind of talk about that for a minute first. But I'm going to go ahead and send this to Anthony first. Anthony, what are some of your thoughts on the coaching carousel on the Big Ten right now?
Well, I'll start with the Michigan State one. Tony Elliott is not a serious name. I'm just going to get that out there right now. I'm assuming everyone's got to have a safety net when they're interviewing, and he would probably be Michigan State's. I also don't think there's that much smoke to Urban Meyer. That's just my 2 cents. I'll probably get some flack for saying that, but I think a lot of the other usual suspects whose names you hear, the Mike Elkos of the world, I think they're much more realistic on who we land at this point. So yeah, I mean, Tony Elliott, whatever. I'm not taking. I don't think there's any smoke behind that one. On the other ones, I've talked ad nauseum about what I think Michigan's. What's happening with Harbaugh. I think he's sick of the NCAA. I think he's gone next year. Northwestern's was interesting. There was a lot of. Similar to Michigan State, they had a lot of off the field scrutiny for the program, and they did what Michigan State could not and rebounded really nicely during the season. They had an interim step in with David Braun, and he took a team that had a pretty scary start to the year and really, has put him in a spot to potentially make a bowl game. So I think it's good that he gets a shot. After having Pat Fitzgerald there for so long, I kind of wonder who else, where else do you go? He was kind of your mainstay for so long. So, I mean, I'm glad to see, I'm happy for David Braun that he's done so well in the situation that he was put in.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Northwestern one is kind of the biggest news and the news that people are kind of happiest for because, he's probably going to be at least in contention for Big Ten Coach of the Year, especially if he wins another game and gets to a bowl. I think, in my personal opinion, you almost have to give it to him after that. Max, what are some of your thoughts about the coaching carousel in the Big Ten right now?
Yeah, to start with the Northwestern one, like you said, Anthony, the David Braun has had a great year. I mean, it was already looking bleak for Northwestern with Fitzgerald. To lose their head coach, to have the roster that they do, and to play in the Big Ten, like it was going to look tough. It was going to look like a maybe 1-2 win season. For them to rip off some of the wins they've had with their roster that they've had is really impressive. So good for David Braun. I'm glad he gets a shot. And actually, shout out to Winona State University. That's my alma mater. That's where he went to school. He played football there, coached there for a time. So kind of cool to see a Division II football player make it into the Big Ten. Yeah, with Michigan, it is hard to see Harbaugh coming back, especially I think if they win the national championship. I don't know why he would stay. He's kind of accomplished everything he wanted to in the collegiate level. So if he wins it all or makes a deep run, I think he'll say, all right, well, see ya. Don't want to deal with this anymore. It's kind of hard to blame him too. He's had a lot of crap thrown at him, especially this year. But yeah, it is hard to see him come back. UCLA, Chip Kelley, that one actually surprised me. I know they've been stagnant a little bit there at UCLA, but it is a tough place. I mean, with USC, with the way the Pac-12 is, it is they're not the premier school or program they've used to be, but Chip Kelley's always kind of seemed like a big name. But the rumor I've been reading about actually that the donors didn't love him or haven't loved him lately, and with the era of NIL and donors being the key to the big money, if they're not going to be donating and giving their support, then if it's Chip Kelley standing in the way, then he's got to go. So it makes sense if that's really the case.
I do kind of wonder if that's going to affect Dante Moore and what he, does he stick around if Chip Kelly's not going to be there? He's an offensive-minded guy. Is Dante Moore in the transfer portal, and then where does he go?
Of course, in the drama with Dante Moore about the NIL deal and he's not making the money that he thought he was and that kind of stuff, I feel like Dante Moore is, he's gone after this year. You mess up an NIL deal nowadays, and I mean, we all saw what happened with Jaden Rashada at Florida. He's over at Arizona State now. I mean, once you mess that up, it kind of feels like you're kind of done with that player for good because NIL is just such an important thing. I heard the same thing that you did, Max, about Chip Kelley just not really working well with the donors and some of those people. And it kind of makes sense if you think about it. Chip Kelley has always been more of an X's and O's guy. I mean, he had that big success when he was at Oregon. But when you think about it, like, Oregon was doing so many things for Chip Kelley there, right? Like, that was right when Oregon was getting innovative with the Nike stuff. Chip Kelley was being super innovative with his offense at the time. There was no NIL, and Chip Kelley had a lot of good recruiters with him on that staff that made a big difference. And so everything just kind of fell into place for him there. And then obviously he goes off to the Eagles, and he does some good things there, but ultimately, he's out of the NFL and back to college football. I could really see Chip Kelley just like going off and doing one of these analyst roles or something like that, like somewhere where he can just like live and breathe X's and O's, doesn't have to worry about recruiting, doesn't have to, be the phone guy and mess with the, the donors and the AD and all those things. Like, it's like just sit him at a desk, let him do X's and O's, and he's going to draw up some really good plays for your guys, So yeah, but.
And to that point, I feel like head coaches nowadays in college football are kind of asked to be a CEO more than anything. Like, they really just have to be aware of everything, and they get involved in a lot of administrative stuff. So for someone who is an X's and O's guy, I could see him not wanting to do that.
Yeah, I think so too. The other guy that I think he's going to struggle with trying to keep his job, and I don't even know if it's because of his university, is Jim Harbaugh. I just can't imagine he comes back to Michigan, like you guys were saying. I don't see a place for him to be able to come back, not necessarily because Michigan's going to be mad at him. Obviously, the Michigan fans and the Michigan administration and everything is rallying behind him. But I just feel like in February or March, when all this NCAA stuff drops, either he's going to get some kind of show cause and be out, or something's going to happen to where, it's like, it's just not worth it for him anymore. Is he really going to want to deal with, a bowl ban and scholarships? I'm not saying that stuff's going to happen, but if any of that stuff does happen, does he really want to deal with that? Especially if he wins the national championship this year, it's like, you can just go to the NFL, be a defensive coordinator, be a head coach, and those jobs are going to be much more available if you win a national championship. So I really don't know what Michigan will do from there. I would think that probably Sherrod Moore would take the job. I think if you get hit with some penalties, it would be really, really difficult to try and go out and get a big name. The name that I've heard the most, Max, I don't know if you like it or not, but the name I've heard the most is PJ Fleck. If anything happens, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't really see it, but I guess other people do. But it is what it is. Do you have any thoughts on that, Max?
I don't see Michigan replacing the winged helmets with winged oars anytime soon. So I don't know if PJ Fleck would even be about that.
That's very true. That's very true. Row the boat, not flap the wings.
Sherrod Moore's had kind of a couple of chances to audition, really, for the role.
Yeah.
And he had some early in the season where he got to coach, but going on the road against Penn State and then getting some run against Ohio State later on, like these are games where he can audition for his coaching job next year. And I think he's proven himself pretty capable, even if they don't beat OSU, but like show up in a big way. I think Sherrod Moore still is very likely the guy next year.
Yeah,
if Harbaugh does go, right.
Max, your buddies over at Sky U are saying, have at him. Not too happy with PJ. And then our boy Sonny, bring Harbaugh to the Bears. Hey, I would love to see Harbaugh and Justin Fields together. That would be very interesting. Unless Harbaugh comes in and then just cuts Justin Fields and brings in J.J. McCarthy. I guess that's also an option. But all right, any more comments on coaching carousel, anything like that, guys? Nope. All right.
One thing I will say, even though it's not Big Ten related, I have one. Sorry. Well, even though it's not Big Ten related, I think the A&M job opening up hurts anybody. Michigan State was one of the bigger jobs that was available now. Now that A&M's open, I think they might not necessarily get their first pick anymore, just based on the bag that we know A&M can throw.
Yeah, for sure. And I even saw some people saying that the Mississippi State job was a better job than Michigan State right now. And I was like, no, it's not. It's not nearly as good.
Yeah, it's an SEC job. So it's an SEC job. So from that perspective, I see it. But like, it's certainly not a better job, maybe an on-par job.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. MSU school,
On par at the very least, but I can't see anything with that Mississippi State program that would lead me to believe that it's a better job than Michigan State. I mean, Michigan State has been to the playoffs, right? Yes, these past 2 years have been hard, but Michigan State, they're willing to pay, they're willing to win. Mississippi State, they're not going to win. So, all right, let's move on to Connor Stalions. No expense reports. So the same guy, what was it, Larry Lage, I think was his name, who reported for the AP that Ohio State and Purdue were working in conjunction with their sign stealing. He is reporting that he went to Michigan and filed a freedom of Knowledge Act or something, or a Freedom of Information Act. That's right. He filed a Freedom of Information Act, which is responded to in record time. That said it was responded to like within just a little while. What was it? A month or something like that. Which, if you know anything about these Freedom of Information Acts, that is like, no, it doesn't happen nearly that fast ever. So just a really interesting situation. And Michigan has come out and said that Connor Stalions never filed any expense reports during his 17 months there when he was formally employed. So obviously Michigan fans are happy about this. This shows that, Michigan wasn't paying for these tickets and stuff like that, at least on the books to do those kinds of things. So a bit of a win here for the Michigan Wolverines. Guys, I want your thoughts. Do you guys feel like this is a win? Do you feel like it matters? I mean, what are kind of some of your general thoughts on this and what goes into the whole Michigan situation? Max, let's start with you first.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like any news now that comes out, it feels like the damage is already done, right? I mean, it seems like he really did it, whether or not Michigan knew about it or not, or who at Michigan knew about it. At this point, it's really hard to believe anything or know who to believe in what everyone's saying. So to me, this coming out is really kind of nothing. It maybe helps Michigan in like some legal cases or whatever they're going to use it for, but at the end of the day, the whole thing is just it's a crazy story. It's kind of funny in a way. In the back of my mind, I always I keep thinking like, is this almost like good for college football that there's just crazy scandals going on in the background that are more or less it's stealing signs. It's not like people are throwing the games or paying off refs or doing anything too bad that obviously there's rules against what they did, so whatever punishment they get, I guess that's what they get. But this news that came out to me is, I don't know, it's a lot of nothing, I guess.
Nothing burger. Anthony, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it doesn't really move the needle for me either. It's kind of like, given some of the other information that's already been revealed about what was going on, it's, I think it'll get used in the court, maybe to Michigan's defense. My counter to it would be, if it truly is not an allowable act, then why would they file an expense report to document it? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So I don't know. It doesn't really exonerate Michigan or Stallions necessarily, but I guess you could kind of you could make the case that it's strengthening the he was acting alone scenario. But given how poorly Stalions did some of his other spy work, right, using a personal credit card and his own Venmo account, like, it wouldn't surprise me if he did leave a paper trail of expense reports to also document it. So I don't know. I think it's just funny to watch. Every headline on this is going to be almost clickbait at this point. People just see Stallions' name and then immediately anger tweet or troll at it. So it's just, I don't know. This one doesn't feel like as monumental as some of the other revelations that we've gotten in this whole saga.
Have we just become numb that like something comes out now and it's like, oh, more information, like, okay, like, I'll read about it because I want to be informed, but it's like, how big a news is this really? To me, I do think that the big news of it is it can be used in court. I think that any rational fan, and maybe Michigan fans would disagree with me on this. That's okay. Michigan fans, you've disagreed with me a lot on Twitter. That's fine. I've seen your cope harder, cry harder, and trust me, I'm coping and crying so hard. But I feel like it is gonna help with the legal side of it for them to be able to say like, hey, we don't have any kind of paperwork on hand, nothing like that. Us fans will be able to say like, look, he probably just went to a donor and like the donor funded him money, or look at this random used vacuum service that had like 1-star reviews on it on Amazon. Like, obviously this guy was funneling money somehow for him to be able to do these things. The $15,000 thing that was put out there before, like, I don't buy that at all. I've gone to games and I can tell you, especially going to games where I'm traveling across state lines, if I went to 30 games, that would not cost $15,000, be much, much more than that. So, and, I don't know what kind of compensation he gets from the military or anything like that. And that's just kind of the whole thing with it. Like, there's a lot of unknowns, but at the same time, like you said, Anthony, it's like, I'm kind of surprised there's no paper trail because this has all been done so poorly. It's almost like you expect something like that. But at the end of the day, if there is none, there's nothing they can really use and hold up in court. So, you guys got any final thoughts on this?
I think it'd be hilarious if the next night game, Michigan, all of their staff just wore sunglasses.
With little blue lights.
Go the extra step. Just troll even harder.
I think that this Ohio State game is going to be just, I don't know. It's going to be heated. It's going to be intense as it's ever been. I don't know. I think this is doing nothing but good things for that rivalry. Honestly, they're just going to. It's the most intense we'll see these fans.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think I was just talking to one of my buddies about this the other day. Like, normally I kind of get concerned about fights happening on the field, and like players getting ejected and stuff like that. I'm not really concerned about that with the players. I think both teams are, disciplined enough and old enough to not really engage in that kind of stuff. I'm more worried about the fans and some of the people I know that are going to the game, and it's like I don't think I would go. You don't know what's going to happen there. I've been to like Indiana versus Akron games where fans can kind of get a little heated with one another. I mean, you get up in the stands and the weather, and you get a little bit of alcohol in you, and it's like you you want to go there and do something, and so I can only imagine the just the vitriol and things like that that's going to be happening with the fans. So we'll hope that there's no fights in the stands for this one. But all right, let's move on to Minnesota at Ohio State. Ohio State enters this game as a 27.5-point favorite. Max, your Gophers, they're fighting for bowl eligibility. I think you have this one, and is Nebraska the other game? I forget, or Northwestern.
We've got Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. I've done so much research on all these teams that are one game out that I get them all mixed up. But yeah, so at Ohio State in this one, right before Michigan, could be a possibility of, resting a lot of players for Ohio State. What are your thoughts going into this one, Max?
Yeah, definitely a chance for a lot of players to be rested for Ohio State. We actually just talked to Eric from the Ohio podcast. He kind of said the same thing. He expects, he's hoping the game is over by halftime for the Buckeyes' sake, and quite honestly, it could happen. But at the same time, too, the Gophers, I mean, PJ's talked about it nonstop. I mean, the injuries at the running back and middle linebacker position, relying on freshmen last game against Purdue, and we all kind of saw how that played out against Purdue. So now trying to stop Marvin Harrison Jr., the Ohio State offense, is going to be a totally different task, especially going into the shoe this late in the season is, I mean, to expect anything other than a near blowout is really all you can do. And yeah, I think, on the flip side too, I think PJ is going to really push for making sure no one else gets hurt this game.
Yeah.
Looking at the Wisconsin game, the Axe game coming up next, being the rivalry that it is, and for what it means to go for football, to be bowl eligible, it does have some importance for what it's worth. So hopefully we stay healthy. The biggest strengths to this, the Gopher defense is the D line, but facing this Ohio State offensive line, it's kind of going to negate that. So, I don't really trust our secondary to do a whole lot against this passing attack. And then on the flip side too, our quarterback play just hasn't been that consistent with Ethan. So, like I said, even if Ohio State rests a number of their starters, I don't think it's going to make too much of a difference. So, I'm thinking it's going to be another Minnesota loss.
Do you know who the running back is in this one? Is it Newbin again?
It'll most likely be Jordan Newbin, yep.
Yeah. He's been a nice story. Brother of Tyler Newbin, right?
Right, yep.
Yeah. And I'm really high on Tyler Newbin. I think Tyler Newbin is one of the best safeties in college football. He's been at the top of my Defensive Player of the Year rankings for the award all season long, because I just think he's a spectacular player. I think that this Minnesota secondary is elevated because of him. I don't like the corners as much as I like Newbin, and trying to remember the other safety's name off the top of my head, but I like both those safeties a lot. Newbin obviously a lot more. So I do think that Ohio State needs to be careful. They talk about sitting all these players and doing these things. I do think that they need to be careful because Minnesota can get a really good running attack together, and Newbin can make some plays, maybe get a pick or something like that. So I don't think it's quite the Michigan State game that people think. I think Minnesota is a much better team than Michigan State is. But I think it's going to be closer than that too. What are your thoughts, Anthony?
Yeah, so Ohio State, I know there's a chance that they could get caught looking ahead to Michigan and resting some starters. So, I could certainly see Minnesota covering in a game like this. But Ohio State also has this, their defense just has this way of just kind of sucking the soul out of you a little bit. And really, that's the unit that's just made strides from last year. Their defense is just, there's a lot to like about it, and there's a lot to be scared about as an opponent coming in and facing them. With Michigan State, I knew we'd come in and get outclassed pretty quickly, and so then we ended up seeing a lot of younger players getting run for a lot of the game, and so I could see Fleck doing something similar to that. If the game is already out of hand, no need to injure the depth that you have if you have a chance to play for a bowl next week. That said, McCord, he's good. I would not say he's as good as that type of quarterback that Ohio State's been putting out recently, but he has a lot to live up to, with Stroud and JT Barrett and everybody, all these other amazing
Dwayne Haskins,
Justin Fields. Like there's so many names that it's like that's hard to live up to that. But he has Marvin Harrison, so there's some room for error, even if Marvin Harrison. Everyone talks about his radius and his athleticism, but it's honestly it's his route running, right? Just always being in the right place at the right time on his routes and getting his defenders to fall down or whatever. He's such a solid route runner. It's really hard to stop him if your secondaries, even with a good secondary, Harrison he jumps off the page.
Yeah, and it's the body control as well with the route running. I think that's what has improved this year to really kind of set him apart. When he goes up in the air, it just looks effortless the way he's able to reach up for the ball and the way he's going down. It's like, oh, there's no way his foot. Oh, never mind, his foot is in bounds. Like no idea how it's happening, but it does. Max, your buddies, they're willing to let the Buckeyes squeak by if it means that you retain the axe. So very kind of you, Sky U Pod, guys. to let the Buckeyes have that. So, all right, let's move on to Michigan at Maryland. Michigan is favored by 19 points against Maryland, a little bit less than I thought. I thought they might get up into the 20s being favored, but obviously being at Maryland seems to be something that they're favoring a little bit more in this one. Anthony, what are your thoughts on the Wolverines versus the Terrapins?
So, this is a Michigan team that is out to prove something. I don't think they will get caught looking ahead in this game. I think they want to maul every single team that they play and the way that they play and just take control of everything. Immediately take the wind out of your sails. Even if you are making it a game by the end of the first half, by the second half, they've just worn you down, right? You saw it against Penn State. That's a good Penn State defense. And Michigan State's like, all right, let's run it 32 straight times and dare you to stop us, right? They can beat you in so many different ways that I just don't see Maryland keeping up. I could see them being close for, quarter and a half, doing something interesting, but I think Tagovailoa is still prone to too many mistakes. They do like to spread you out, but without, the Michigan second, I just don't see any weakness in this defense. It's going to be too much for Maryland to overcome. And I think Michigan covers pretty easily on the road.
Yeah, I think that the secondary of the Michigan defense is better than, like the edge and the linebackers. The interior of that defensive line is elite. I mean, I think everybody saw the highlight of the 340-pound Kenneth Grant chased down Nicholas Singleton. I mean, that's just ridiculous. The athleticism to be that big and still chase a guy down. So, but you're right, Anthony. Even when you look at it and you say, well, the edge and the linebackers might be a bit of a weakness, like those are still, NFL players or will it be free agents someday? So it's like, how much of a weakness is it really? Max, what are your thoughts going into this one?
Yeah, much like the Ohio State, wanting to end this game by halftime, Michigan probably wants to do the same thing. But all year long, you've heard them called they're like a python. So it'll be interesting to see if they can kind of squeak out a few more points before half to kind of, coast into the end of the game and try not to get anyone hurt before the last game of the season. But Maryland too, Maryland always feels like a team that kind of gets forgotten about. They're not the biggest football program, but they always feel like they're talented, and obviously with the quarterback they have and Tua's little brother, they always seem like they're in every game. But this back half of the season has been pretty tough for them. They've kind of gone through the gauntlet a little bit. They did get a win against Nebraska last week, but even that being a low-scoring game. So I feel like Michigan's definitely catching Maryland, probably at the perfect time, too, for this one, where Maryland's just kind of defeated. Michigan could, the emotions of last week was probably a lot in a normal season. You'd probably expect a letdown here, but with all that's going on, it's kind of all unprecedented. Like you said, I don't see Michigan letting up here, being caught off guard or being caught looking ahead at all. So, I think Michigan can easily put this one away by halftime, do what they have to do in the second half of the game and just continue to take care of business like they've done all year.
Yeah, I forgot to ask score predictions on the last one. So, Anthony, score prediction on this one? You got one?
Yeah, so I think I had 45-10 Michigan. I think it's not often that teams score more than 10 points on this defense. I think Maryland they get a field goal early and then they get a touchdown in garbage time. But even Michigan's depth that's the other thing they have going for them is when everybody gets off the field, the second stringers could start at most other Big Ten schools. They're so deep at every position. They can just bully you.
Yeah, really keep it going after that. What's your score prediction on this one, Max?
Yeah, I've got Michigan 35-14. 14 would be a lot for Maryland, but like I said, I think maybe late touchdown, end of the game. They've got a little bit of a high-flying offense at times.
If Purdue can get 13, Maryland can get 14, right? Maybe 18 seconds left. Get that last touchdown. I actually have 27-6 in this one. I think, Sharon Moore kind of strikes me as just kind of he wants to get through this stuff. And Jim Harbaugh might be back. We'll see what happens with the TRO on Friday. But I kind of feel like in this one, they're going to try to do what they can to kind of mitigate injuries and stuff like that, kind of like Ohio State. And they're just going to really rely on their defense to make that stuff happen. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's somewhere around 27, 30 points to, something less than 10, kind of like some of those early games on in the season were there. So, all right, guys, let's get to Rutgers at Penn State. Penn State opens up as a 20.5-point favorite versus Rutgers. I was surprised to see Penn State favored by more against Rutgers than Michigan was against Maryland. I know Penn State's at home, but I still feel like Michigan has been so dominant against some of these other teams that, I thought that would have been higher. But, Max, what were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, Penn State coming off the loss to Michigan and kind of, trying to regroup here. They really, obviously everyone's seen the defense that Penn State's had. And versus this Rutgers offense that really all they want to do is run the football and can't really do much else. Seems like a perfect matchup for Penn State. Penn State also is just dominating the turnover battle, and Rutgers, not turning the ball over a ton, but always seems like they turn the ball over in the most inopportune times. So that definitely feels like an advantage to Penn State. And yeah, like I said, Rutgers not being able to pass the ball and really produce too much offense. They do have a solid defense all year long. We've seen it, obviously not last week against Iowa, but Rutgers is always that scrappy team that you really can't look past. But I think Penn State coming in maybe a little bit pissed off. Yeah, I'd have this one at Penn State 29 to Rutgers 7.
Interesting. Yeah, what's your thoughts, Anthony?
Yeah, so I'm surprised the spread is this big because of Penn State's offense. I think they're really they showed you how limited offensively they really are. I mean, obviously they have a pretty solid running back duo, but when you're asking Drew Aller, like with the game in his hands and James Franklin calling the plays, they put their tail between their legs against Michigan. So I think this one's probably a little more defensive-minded battle. Both defenses pretty strong. I think I've got Penn State 27, Rutgers 13. I think they to Rutgers is Ohio State sometimes they like to pull out some tomfoolery, and I think Shiano's he'll have them ready to play, but I think Rutgers doesn't bring in the offensive line that Michigan does. So, if Rutgers runs the ball 32 times in a row, I don't think they achieve quite the same result as Michigan did, even with a running back.
Yeah, I think that, with Rutgers wanting to run it as much as they are, I think it's really going to prevent Penn State from being able to score as many points as maybe they have in some other games. So I'm right there with you, Anthony. I got 24-10 in this one, and I'm going to be interested to see what the offense looks like without Mike Yurcich now. I think Mike Yurcich caught a lot of blame when in reality last game I think James Franklin was kind of the one that made some more poor decisions. I mean, there was some play calling that I thought was a little questionable, but going for two as many times as they did against Michigan, I was just like, dude, you're killing momentum for your team and you're really not helping yourself out here. So I kind of think Mike Yurcich was a bit of a scapegoat there, but we'll see what this Penn State offense looks like and how much time they'll have to operate. Because, like I said, I do think that Rutgers is going to run the ball a lot, and that's really going to take some time off. So, I got 24-10.
So you're telling me that you can fire an offensive coordinator mid-season? You're allowed to do that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to leave that out there for the Michigan State program.
Were you the one that tweeted out that was like, hey, there's another coordinator that's available if Penn State wants to find him?
I'm trying to implicate our special teams coordinator and offensive coordinator for point shaving so that we'll fire them.
They're stealing sides. Look at the evidence. It's like, well, they've not been very good. So if they have been stealing sides, it's not good. If they have been point shaving, they've been betting, the other team to cover. So, all right, let's get to Illinois at Iowa. This is actually a big game. Illinois has some hopes to win the Big Ten West here, and they could tie. Well, not in this game, but if they win this game and they win the next game in Iowa, obviously if they lose this game and lose the next one, they would get into a tiebreaker with Iowa, and they would be able to win. There's some other crazy tiebreaker scenarios. I posted something earlier this morning about like all the tiebreaker scenarios, so if you want to go read that and figure that out, you can. But I do think this is going to be an interesting game. It's at Iowa. Seems like Iowa has a super favorable schedule this year because I'm looking at all these like hard games and seeing, at Iowa, and they only played Penn State. They didn't play Ohio State. I'm not trying to take anything away from Iowa, but Cooper DeJean out for the season, it sounds like. I think that's a huge blow to them, more so on special teams than it is on defense. Don't get me wrong, I think defense is, hurt by that, but I think Cooper DeJean is just a dynamic player who can make things happen and get you yards on punt returns and stuff like that. So, but Anthony, what are some of your thoughts going into this game?
Defense, and more defense. This is it. This has Big Ten West Classic written all over it. Low scoring, just watching paint dry. Use whatever analogy you want. Iowa is just they're gonna muck the game up. They're gonna make you, they have this way of just really just keeping the game as a rock fight. And I think that's what we see here. I think, you could have some fun moments. I think Altmaier's got, some pretty solid options, especially with Williams as a wide receiver. I think, Iowa's not gonna, I think they have this way on special teams of always finding, even without Cooper DeJean, I feel like they'll have some favorable turnover that goes their way. I mean, you saw what happened against Michigan State. They, I think the turnover, Michigan State had that game in hand, and Iowa just in Kinnick, they turn you over. That happens. So I think this one low scoring, 17-6 Iowa. I think it was 22-0 against Rutgers last week. So 17-6 feels right to me.
I'll be honest. If John Paddock was playing in this one instead of Luke Altmaier, I might choose Illinois. I just feel like John Paddock has really been balling right now, and I don't know what Brett Bielema is doing. I don't know how Illinois fans feel about it. I know on the Illini cast they were kind of going back and forth about it a little bit, but it's definitely an interesting situation to have a guy throw for 500 yards one week and then start the other guy next week. I don't have a stat on that, but I'm sure there's a stat somewhere that says that doesn't normally happen. Max, you are as close to an Iowa expert as we can get. You guys obviously had your big win against them earlier this year. What are your thoughts on the Hawkeyes playing Illinois this weekend?
Yeah, definitely will be a defensive battle. It is interesting, though, how much, Illinois' defense really isn't what it was last year. They're still solid, but coming off of last year, Illinois' defense was almost comparable to Iowa's. So this year, I think it's really just the secondary's kind of taking a step back. They obviously lost a few NFL guys, which makes sense. But still having Drazon Newton up front, I mean, that dude is an absolute game wrecker. For what Iowa wants to do, just play in the trenches, he's going to have a huge day for that defense to have success. But obviously, Iowa's offense really isn't going to help them too much anyways. But I think he can force a couple turnovers or, just give Illinois' offense a chance to get a few more touches. Because they're going to need it. Because the Iowa defense has just been unstoppable. Obviously, without Cooper DeJean, that's a huge loss. In the secondary, but their front seven is still just very impressive. And that's as a Gopher fan saying this. Like, they are unbelievable year in and year out. So it will be like you said, a Big Ten West Classic where it might seem like neither team really wants to even score at all. It could be tied at 0-0 at halftime. We've seen it before already with Iowa, but. Going back to Illinois' quarterbacks too, I am shocked that Paddock is not starting this game. I mean, coming in the fourth quarter against Minnesota to win it, and then having the huge week he had last week, obviously against Indiana, but still a big week nonetheless. You'd think he'd ride with the hot hand. Altmaier's been okay this year, but obviously they trust him and what he can do. So we'll see how that works out. But yeah, I've got an Iowa win, 14-9. Just being at Kinnick, it's a really tough place to play.
See, we're all taking the under on this one, which I've advised people to do with Iowa all season long. Even when Iowa got, 402 yards of total offense last week, still hit the under. So I think that's hilarious. The over-under on this one is 30. I'm going to go with 16-13 Iowa. I think that Illinois is actually going to be able to score a little bit more without Cooper DeJean there. I don't think that he's like the X factor, like the defense falls apart without him. I mean, he's definitely an X factor, but I actually think Jay Higgins is more of an X factor on that defense than DeJean is, just because of the position he plays and where he's at to make the plays that he's able to make. So, but I tell you, I like what I've seen from Illinois lately. When I saw them play Nebraska and they lost 20-7 earlier in the year, I was like, there's no hope for Illinois. They're gonna end the year, kind of the way Purdue is ending the year. But credit to them, they've really bounced back, and big reason because of that has been John Paddock. The past two games. So I mean, he came in late 2 games ago and an 80-some yard touchdown pass, or no, it was like 3 for 3 for 85 yards there at the end of the game, and then obviously 500 yards. So we'll see if Luke Altmaier can make it happen. I don't think he can. I think the Iowa defense is going to be too much, but it'll definitely be an interesting game to say the least. All right, let's move on to, speaking of Nebraska at Wisconsin. I don't know what's happening with the Nebraska quarterback situation. That has been one I've not been able to predict all season long. I think they had 4 or 5 turnovers between the 3 quarterbacks that they played last week alone. It's really, really hard to pick Nebraska to win anything with all those turnovers, but the defense is stout. The defense is really, really good, able to make those things happen. So we'll see what goes on there. We'll get back to Sky U Pod. They said Illinois by 1 billion. Yes. If they can score 1 billion on Iowa, over under 1.5 invalid catches from the Hawks. Well, if Cooper DeJean isn't playing, I don't know. He was the only invalid catch I think I've ever seen. So
Gophers had one earlier this season.
Did they?
They did.
Okay, I didn't see that one then. Who was it against?
Eastern Michigan. You weren't watching.
Oh, yeah, that's why. I try to watch all the Big Ten games. I missed some of the other ones, but so Nebraska at Wisconsin. Wisconsin obviously favored by 4.5 in this one. Going to be an interesting game. Max, what are some of your thoughts going into the Nebraska at Wisconsin game?
2 teams that are really kind of struggling here. Like you said, Nebraska's offense just can't figure it out. Don't know what's going on with quarterback play. They don't really even seem to have real quarterbacks on their roster. But
it's one way to put it.
Like you said, their defense has been playing outstanding. It's really been the key to most of these games being close. And then Wisconsin too, obviously losing their starting quarterback middle of the season, that's a really tough draw, especially under the new coaching regime, trying to figure out everything kind of on the fly, kind of being shorthanded there as well. But I think just Wisconsin coming out the loss to Northwestern, that was such a weird game. especially at Camp Randall. That just doesn't happen. But it was kind of a reminder that, Nebraska, new coach in Matt Rule, Wisconsin, new coach in Luke Fickell. Like, these teams are just not the same as, we've been used to. So it will be interesting to see how it plays out. I do think Wisconsin overall is obviously the better team. They are, on paper, more similar than it seems like. Both teams being solid defensively, can't quite figure out the offense, but still being, good enough in the run game. And neither team really winning the turnover battle either, so I think it will be another low-scoring one. I've got Wisconsin 19 to Nebraska's 11. Low-scoring and probably kind of ugly.
Yeah, it's kind of where I have it too. I have Wisconsin winning 21-10. I think Nebraska just turns it over too many times in this one, especially with some of the questions at quarterback. Anthony, what are your thoughts on this one?
I don't care how bad Wisconsin may be having of a season. If Nebraska loses to Michigan State and turns over the ball the way they did, and they do it in a night game at Camp Randall, Nebraska's not winning this game. They're just not. And props to Rule for they're in bowl contention. That I think that's further than people thought they'd be right now. But it's I think it's kind of this is going to definitely has a battle of mid game written all over it. I think neither team is going to really want to win it too much, but one team has to. So if one team had to win it, I pick Wisconsin.
They are both playing for bowl eligibility, so it's like, do they want to keep playing or not?
They are, so they'll want to win, but when you look at the play on the field, you kind of wonder if that's actually what they want. But I think it just comes down to quarterback play. I watch Nebraska's quarterback, and he just makes these boneheaded decisions, and it's the consequence of not really having a quarterback, like you said, Max. Like it doesn't seem like they have any option there.
Well, that's where I've been buying for.
The score prediction was 17-14 Wisconsin.
Okay. Yeah, that's why I've been vying for Jeff Sims to play, because I feel like Jeff Sims actually has an arm on him. I feel like one of the reasons why Heinrich Harbaugh struggles to not turn over the ball so much is because, one, he makes really bad decisions, and two, his arm sucks. So then when I look at Jeff Sims, I'm like, okay, well, Jeff Sims is clearly just as athletic, if not more. He also doesn't make good decisions, but guess what? He does have an arm. I feel like, the problem with his turnovers is more that he's turning the ball over because of poor decision making. Heinrich Harbaugh can make a good decision, but he can just throw the ball 15 yards the other way. So it's one of those things where I don't really understand why Jeff Sims isn't playing more than Heinrich Harbaugh. Maybe, one of the Sully Scoop guys can help us out with that one of these days. But to me, it's like you just ride with Jeff Sims and you try to get this turnover thing figured out, because I feel like he has more potential, and I feel like he's going to be more of a player down the road. I think he still has eligibility left after this year to do those things. So, all right, Anthony, we'll get to your prized Spartans at Indiana. In this one, the Spartans are actually favored. No, sorry, I have that wrong. Indiana is actually favored.
I was going to say, I thought it was Indiana -4.
Yeah, I was typing too fast.
I was typing too fast. Spread.
That's what I get. Yeah. There we go. Fixed it. What are your thoughts, Anthony?
So this is the Big Ten East pillow fight of the century. Two teams who the bottom has fallen out, and they're just, they're playing for team pride at this point. And honestly, I think if that's the case, I feel like Michigan State has more of the chip on their shoulder, pride to play for. The guys just want to win for the interim coach. You saw how they rallied around Harlan Barnett when he got the win against Nebraska. I think they're just going to come on the road ready for business. They have a lot of young talent all over the place on this team. And so it's a matter of getting those guys to play together in spite of whatever the coaching staff is doing for them. Getting these guys in a position to win. With that said, I think MSU redeems themselves from the botched kick at the end of last year against Indiana and wins the game on a game winner from Jonathan Kim, who has been having a really good year at kicker this year. So I think Michigan State wins it 31-28 in a barn burner, exciting fourth quarter game. Michigan State has the ball last. They end the game on a high note.
Barn burner fourth quarter pillow fight. It's quite the description.
You don't hear
of this
those
one.
words used on this in the same prediction very often.
No, you don't. What's going
Oh
on with
boy.
Noah Kim though, Anthony? Like, I feel like because like they played like a 6-year senior or something like that against Ohio State. I imagine he's probably already lost his eligibility for the year. He can't be redshirted. What's the deal with him?
So I think Noah Kim is injured.
Oh, okay.
Whoever's left, so they have Caton Hauser, who's the redshirt freshman. He's been taking the majority of snaps since Kim went down.
Right.
Um,
And
and
then Levet, he's trying to
and then
redshirt, right?
Levet, he used all of his eligibility. Michigan State definitely mismanaged his gameplay. I think they've played him in for 1 or 2 snaps in one game, and it was just kind of like if you're going to ride with Levitt and let him, if you want him to stick around, let him know that he's the guy and just play it out. So I don't think they managed that situation well. I think based on what we've seen, I think Hauser gets the nod. If things get really out of hand, like Michigan State's not playing for a bowl anymore, right? They've played out of bowl contention. So really at this point, it's let Levitt know like, hey, we want to preserve your red shirt. We do want to play you, but they just don't want to suck up that year of eligibility from him and do him injustice by mismanaging that and then also burning the red shirt. So I don't know. Yeah. I think Hauser gets the start. I'd be surprised to see Levitt play at all. If I'm being honest.
At the very least this season, Anthony, you can say you're 1-0 against Connor Stalions on the sideline.
Oh boy.
So. Max, what are your thoughts going into this one? Or sorry, go ahead, Anthony. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say, I'm like, oh yeah, we can just turn to basketball season to solve all of our problems, but you know how well that's going. I know this isn't a basketball podcast, but we're 1-2. So.
Oh, trust me, we talked about it in the last one. We talked about Duke and James Madison and AJ Hoggard, so which apparently he came out and took the blame, so which rightfully so, it is all his fault. Anyway,
good on him
Max.
Yeah.
Max, what are your thoughts on this one, man?
Yeah, not to be too harsh, but yeah, it seems like neither team really does too much well. But both teams.
You can't hurt me. You can't hurt me anymore.
Yeah, like you said, both teams just want the nightmare to end. I was really shocked actually last week to see Indiana and Illinois be as high scoring of a game as it was. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know what I think the total was like. It was under 50, I'm pretty sure, and then both teams getting in the 40s was...
What was it, 48, 45, I think, or something like that?
Something like that. So, I mean, that was shocking. To me, it showed, like, I don't know, does Indiana have some life in them still? But, Tom Allen, I know he's been on the hot seat. It's really hard to say. I don't know much of, what the fans or what the players think, but Tom Allen from the outside just seems like an old-school coach that guys could rally around if he gets them fired up, but... I don't know if they're just sick of him in Indiana, but
So I think he's on the hot seat, but I think his buyout's too big. I don't think Indiana can afford to buy him out right now.
Sure, that's true.
That's the hard part.
Yeah, I guess the one guy that stands out in this game to me is Indiana's wide receiver Donovan McCulley. I mean, 6'5", 200-pound wide receiver, absolute freak. So if he can make some plays, I think Indiana can win this one 26-24. Hope it's a good game. Hope it's a close game for both these programs.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. I think, honestly, if I'm looking at it, I picked the score to be 28-21, and I could literally see either team being 28 and either team being 20. I look at the score, and I'm like, well, this is going to be one of them. I kind of lean IU. I see what you're saying, Anthony, about, like, them playing for them. But I feel like Brendan Sorsby is out there trying to make a name for himself, the quarterback for IU, and I really do feel like, I mean, I've said it all season long, I feel like Indiana has athletes and has talent on offense, and we saw it against Illinois last week. Like, they have these playmakers who can do these things, but just completely incompetent coaching makes that a terrible... I mean, let's not forget, Indiana did take Louisville down to the wire. I mean, they were Louisville, who's, 9-1? Right now, they took them down to the goal line, and they were a yard away from tying that game up in the fourth quarter. So I do think this Indiana team is capable. It's just, and also they were a score away from Ohio State at halftime. So I do think this Indiana team is capable, but I do kind of wonder some of the same stuff you are, Max, about like, is this team really playing for Tom Allen? Is it LEO, love each other, or is it SEO, sick of each other? I don't know. But we'll kind of see. It does kind of come down to me. Whichever team kind of wants it more is really who's gonna win this one. And I kind of lean IU just because I feel like the fans playing at home, that kind of stuff. That's my thoughts. So yeah,
they're remarkably similar teams in that they have horrendous coaching staffs. They both have a single win against a Big Ten West school where they scored 20 points to win the game 2 weeks ago. So a lot of parallels between these two. It's honestly, it's a toss-up. It's a 50-50 game for me.
I didn't even realize the 20 points. Like you said, that is hilarious. Yeah, and they're both 3-7. Yeah, so it is an interesting one. All right, let's get to our last game. Purdue at Northwestern. Purdue is favored in this one. I think I have the favorite right on that one. Yes, Purdue is favored in this one. The 3-7 Boilermakers are favored over the 5-5 Northwestern Fighting David Braun's. So we'll see kind of what happens. Purdue's shown some life here and there. They've also shown zero life here and there. So they're kind of one of those inconsistent teams. I'm not really sure what to expect. Max, in this Big Ten West battle, what do you expect?
Yeah, well, Purdue coming off the absolute whooping over the Gophers last week was such a disappointment. But they did show that, you give them an inch, they're going to take it offensively. Hudson Card, I think, is a solid quarterback. Obviously doesn't have as much talent around him as Purdue has had in the past. Their offensive line being decimated with injuries. I think they had a center playing tackle against us. He still did great. But yeah, I mean, they can make plays. They have, they want to score a lot of points. They can be an explosive offense, but on the flip side too, their defense can be just as explosive in a negative way in allowing teams to score a lot of points on them. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how they come off the win. If it's a little bit of a hangover, or if they're just having fun at the end of the year, getting a couple wins. But the same thing for Northwestern, having their interim coach promoted to head coach, getting a home game here. They've been playing well. Obviously, too, the win against Wisconsin. Is there going to be a hangover, or is it just, they don't really care who they're playing or who they're beating at this point? Just keep it going. So, to me, I think Northwestern can win this one, especially in Evanston. So I've got Northwestern 28-24.
It's about what I have too. I have Northwestern winning 24-20. I think that there's going to be some fire with this team with David Braun recently hired. They're playing at home. They're playing for bowl eligibility. I mean, I just felt like there was a fire from this team. Sorry to bring it up, Max, but when they had that comeback win against Minnesota early in the season, that you saw that this team, they weren't content with just 2 or 3 wins this season. Like, they wanted to compete and they wanted to do something and kind of shock the Big Ten, which, I mean, people are going to make fun of, 6-6, oh, you're bowl eligible Big Ten West team. But at the end of the day, I mean, when you look at what Northwestern was supposed to be going into the season, losing Pat Fitzgerald, David Braun, new to the coaching staff, I think he was new to FBS, right? I think he was at FCS before this season, or at least a couple of seasons before, to come in and do what he's done, to connect with the players and do what he's done. I just think it's admirable, and I think that those Northwestern players are going to rally around them, and I think Northwestern's going to win 24-20. What are your thoughts, Anthony?
So you actually stole my score prediction exactly, 24-20. Oh. I also have Northwestern. I think they. I'm a little surprised at the spread the way that it was. I just, even with Purdue, putting on the performance they did last week, and Evanston isn't exactly an intimidating road environment. I just think Northwestern has more to prove with this game, right? With re-signing their coach, really committing to him, and I think the players are going to be fired up on senior day. And, I think this one will be a pretty fun one. I think it'll be, pretty back and forth, obviously with, Hudson Card. I think Purdue is, they're dynamic, right? They can spread you out and put up a bunch of points. I think Northwestern solid on defense. They're not show-stopping, but they'll do a good enough job to to get the job done. 24-20.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think, Purdue's problem this season on defense has been, I guess it's not really a problem because they do kind of limit the big plays sometimes as much as they can with that safety Thiemann who plays who plays like 20 yards back from the line of scrimmage. I've seen it pointed out almost every single broadcast. They do like this wide view and they show how far back he is. That really does limit how many defenders you have going toward the ball. And I do think that Purdue is a much better running team when they have both Maccabee and Tyrone Tracy back there. I think both guys were either at or around or above 150 yards last week. Like, that was super impressive, especially, like I said, with the offensive line, or like Max said, with the offensive line, the way that it is right now. So, I don't know. Like I said, Purdue is just one of those teams that, like, they're so inconsistent. If they can kind of just catch that magic, they can do something really, really special. But like I said, with Northwestern, I feel like this is kind of a magical situation where they want to become bowl eligible. So I do think that this game is going to be a little bit slept on, but it's going to be more interesting than people think. So, all right, well, that's all we got for the Big Ten. Do you guys have any thoughts on Week 12 in college football or anything else in the Big Ten you want to get to before we get out of here? All right.
Get out your popcorn for Pillow Fight of the Century, everyone. It's going to be a good one.
We'll all be locked in. 12 noon on BTN. Don't even worry about Michigan and Maryland. Penn State and Rutgers. Purdue, Northwestern. Forget those games. Head on over to BTN and watch the Pillow Fight of the Century. This is one of those situations where I wish YouTube TV would let me pick what four screens I could have on my thing, because right now it's just like I get one Big Ten game and 3 SEC games, and I don't really care for that, but it is what it is. So, all right, well, thanks Max and Anthony for joining me on this one. Appreciate you guys. Like I said, if you're watching, please do like and subscribe. We appreciate it. Check out Big Banter Sports, BigBanterSports.com. Check us out there. We got one more comment from Chris Smith. Good stuff. Thanks, gentlemen. Thank you for watching, Chris. We appreciate you, man. We appreciate everybody else who watches as well. You guys have a great night. We'll see you next time.